Governor Kathy Hochul in Western New York today. She was down in Dunkirk announcing that that city will get $10 million to revitalize its waterfront. Well, she might have had a little extra pep in her step. A new Siena College poll released this morning showed the governor has her best approval ratings ever since she took office. Voters were asked if they approve of the job that she's doing, and we'll come back here and show you the number there. 56% said yes. And if you break it down by party, 78% of Democrats gave her thumbs up. Only 17% of Republicans felt the same way. You would expect to see a big partisan divide on something like that. But what might surprise you is the long list of topics that both parties seem to agree on. Things like giving judges more discretion to set bail, not increasing tuition at SUNY schools, basing the state's minimum wage on inflation, 12 weeks of paid family leave for state employees, and they agree that crime is still a top priority. That all from the Siena poll today. Joining us live right now is Steve Greenberg. He is pollster with Siena College Research Institute. Steve, it's always great to get your insight when you have these polls. And we just rattled off there this laundry list of topics that voters from both parties seem to agree on. As you look through your polling data, do you anticipate that that leads to some type of bipartisan action in the legislature as the session is now underway?
You know, my magic 8 ball is not going to help me on that question, Michael, but I hope so. Look, for the last several years, we've talked about the great partisan divide. And let's be clear, there are still some issues where there's a huge partisan divide. But there are a number of issues, you highlighted 5 of them, where Republicans and Democrats, they may disagree as to extent, but they're on the same page on a whole variety of issues. One more you didn't mention is whether Long Island Congressman George Santos should resign or not. Democrats, Republicans, Independents all agree he should.
I saved the Santos question for last, so I'm going to come back to that in just a moment with you, Steve. We mentioned Governor Hochul's approval ratings there at an all-time high, according to your poll. Still maybe not as high as you'd like them to be, not as high as some, other governors out there. But, she's going through this battle right now with her own party over her chief judge nomination. When you dig into this poll, what are we to make of the fact that she is polling higher than she ever has? But when you ask people, do you think she's going to be successful at getting X, Y, and Z done, they're not super optimistic. How do you explain that?
Well, look, I mean, her numbers are the best they've been. 56, as you said earlier, 56 approve of the job that Hochul's doing as governor, 36 disapprove. But that's still not through the roof. And when we look at her favorability rating, 48% of voters now say they view Kathy Hochul favorably, 42% view her unfavorably. 48 is as high as it's ever been for her. But again, she's been governor for a year and a half, and she's never had a majority of New Yorkers viewing her favorably. I think New Yorkers are cautiously optimistic right now heading into 2023. And I should note the change that we saw, that big jump that we saw in her job approval rating, not so much from Democrats. They loved her to begin with, even last month. Not from Republicans. They hated her last month and they still hate her this month. Independents made a real turnaround. Last month, independents were disapproving of Hochul 58 to 35%. This month, they approve of Hochul by a narrow 47 to 43%. But that's a major turnaround among independent voters.
Steve, crime is a topic that you asked voters about a lot during the recent election season. It remains important to New Yorkers. We're showing the results there when you ask them how serious a problem do you think crime is across the state. If you add very serious and somewhat serious, you're looking at 93%. The rates are higher when you look at New York City and also among people of color. But when you ask if crime is bad in somebody's own community, the percentages are much lower. What should we make of what this is telling you about how New Yorkers feel about crime now?
Well, I think they're still high. Even when we ask voters how serious a problem is crime in your community, 63% say it's either very or somewhat serious. Only 28, more than a quarter of New Yorkers think that their crime in their community is a very serious problem. But what we see as a result of that, and by the way, those numbers are the same as they were last month, same as they were a year ago when we asked that question. But what we then see is on the bail question, which you mentioned earlier, giving judges more discretion. It's the reason why nearly 2/3 of New Yorkers agree with Hochul's proposal to give New Yorkers more discretion when it comes to bail for serious crimes.
Finally, Steve, I mentioned I've only got about 30 seconds left, but you asked New York voters what they think of Representative George Santos, the downstate Republican who faces a lot of calls for him to resign, including a lot of Republican members of our congressional delegation. What are voters saying about George Santos?
Well, they don't particularly like him. Only 16% of New Yorkers view him favorably. 56% view him unfavorably. By the way, that's a lot of New Yorkers who have heard of a freshman congressman. I bet you there's a Western New York freshman congressman who has not been heard of by nearly 2/3 of voters. And when we ask, should he resign? Overwhelmingly, 59% of voters say he should, 17% say he shouldn't. Democrats more than Republicans, but Republicans still 2-1 say he should resign rather than he should not resign.
Stephen Greenberg is the pollster with Siena College Research Institute with this new polling out earlier today. Steve, always great to have your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.